Well, good morning. I'm actually doing a follow-up today on yesterday's video about court. The title is Contempt Charges Violate Rights and Nullify Remedies. I'll hold you in contempt of court and have you arrested. This is a threat so-called judges use to intimidate and maintain control of their court, preventing people from exercising their rights. It virtually eliminates and nullifies remedies that exist within the law to protect people from such abuses. It is a smokescreen used in violation of Miranda versus Arizona, which states, open quote, where rights secured by the Constitution are involved, there can be no rulemaking or legislation which would abrogate them. Also, in Miller versus U.S., it states, the claim and exercise of a constitutional right cannot be converted into a crime. These are Supreme Court rulings that are violated in our Admiralty Courts multiple times every day. Why? I suggest it is because these are not real courts, and judges are only actors playing the role of judge. It's all a big fraud used to enslave human beings and to extort value. As long as they are able to get away with this, law and truth do not matter and justice is impossible. Remedies are simply ignored. One of my friends, when I was intended to share this yesterday, I had it on my screen, I just didn't share it. He said, I really loved your insights on what are we supposed to do. That was the video he's actually commenting on. Everything you conveyed resonated totally. As Cobra conveyed, we are effing ourselves due to the alienation, denial, and disunity, not authentically assisting each other and being there authentically due to being burnt out and being in the matrix. What a conundrum. Indeed, we face a tremendous conundrum. I also forgot to mention yesterday, I drew the foundation for it when I said that a couple of people were expressly told that they could not represent themselves if in a jury trial in that court building. And yet, when I said that I wanted a jury trial on the charge of resisting arrest without violence, he didn't even question whether I wanted an attorney or anything like that. It didn't matter. I mean, they knew already that I could handle myself. I was competent to handle my own defense, which indeed I am. Now, the other thing I want to say is about remedies, and I want to make it very, very clear. I tried not using the name when I appeared the first time in this court building. It's not a courthouse. It's a building that claims to be a court. It's nothing of the sort. But in any case, I tried to show that I was not the straw man, and I was not even the name. And I had filed papers which plainly stated my status in relation to the straw man, and plainly enumerated the laws supporting my right as a private citizen, not a straw man, not a public citizen. My paperwork laid the foundation of truth based on law. Did it matter? I was threatened the first time I appeared with contempt of court if I did not come into the ship, open that gate, and walk in. They were ready to arrest me right there before I even entered their courtroom. I was still in the public area. And then they threatened again when I ask questions of the judge. I ask the questions, the judge said. In other words, you can't speak. You're dead. You're dead. Now, I never even in that first appearance acknowledged the name. They came and picked me out by sending a public defender back to me, picked me out, and he said, we identified you, because I didn't sign in, if you remember the earlier video. I did not sign in. I said, I held up my birth certificate, my certificate of live birth. I held it up and I says, this is the defendant in this case. They wouldn't accept that. But they came and got me anyway, identifying me from my pictures. They didn't even ask my name in that first thing. The name didn't matter. Now, this time they did ask what my name is. And I stated plainly, my family name is Van Dyke. Well, that wasn't good enough. What's your first name? And I says, they named me Ron. Oh, so you're Ron Van Dyke. And I said, that's what they call me. I didn't claim to be the name or even to represent the account, which I have set up a private trust in the name of Ronald Thomas Van Dyke, all capital letters. That was paperwork that I had filed with the court. So I took back possession of the name in a private trust, trumping their claim to own the name. I also previously claimed ownership of the name through the UCC1 foundations and principles laid out in UCC1 using their fraudulent Uniform Commercial Code. But it's not completely fraudulent because it contains remedies. The point is that I'm making is remedies don't matter. The point is people like Rod Class are now in jail. Why? Because he knows the remedies, he knows the law. Several other people I know that have tried these things have ended up going to jail because they have been held in contempt of court, and the judges are the ones that are breaking the law. They are violating their own law. Now, in the rules of civil procedure in federal court, it plainly states that the people's rights are held on a nice plateau. I don't remember the exact wording, but that claim that people's rights are important is nullified in the very next sentence when it says, once the rules are established, the rights shall have no effect. They nullify people's rights by rule making. And what did the Miranda versus Arizona say? There can be no rule making or legislation that would abrogate rights that are secured by the Constitution. Now, the second one that I cited, Miller versus U.S., there is no such thing as constitutional rights. So that actually is a misstatement. Lawfully, that's a misstatement. They are rights guaranteed or secured by the Constitution. They are not constitutional rights. You don't get them from the Constitution. You get them because you're a human being. They are natural rights. They are rights that are unalienable and self-evident. Okay? That's common sense. That's also common law. That is the law of the land in the United States of America. And it is also, rights are also upheld in the Charter of the United Nations. So even under the United Nations, there are rights that are recognized as being human rights. Now, that could be expanded upon or whatever, but rights exist and are acknowledged even in the fraudulent government system. And there are always remedies provided within the law to uphold people's rights. But They don't obey the law. They don't care about truth. They nullify everything. Now, courts are like a casino. A casino, you all know, it's fixed. They will allow a certain percentage of winning, but the house always is the ultimate winner. They will allow 10, 15%, 5% of the cases to go on behalf of the defendant. Why? Because they want to make it look like you can win in court. And they want it to look like it's because you did something right. Like you didn't use the name. I wonder, I don't have statistics, but I wonder how many people ended up in jail because they tried not to use the name and were held in contempt of court. I wonder how many people ended up in jail, behind bars, maybe even beaten and abused in other ways because they tried to stand up for their rights. In violation of the law, the judges sentenced them hiding behind the smokescreen of contempt of court, which is I believe that's a felony. I'm not sure, I didn't look it up, but I'll bet you that's considered a felony. And yet, it isn't even a legitimate law. Now, contempt of court, if you threaten somebody in a court, if you threaten the judge, if you threaten any of the other, quote, officers of the court, and that's what they really are. They're officers because in an Admiralty Court, it's a military court. And constitutional rights, or rights guaranteed by the Constitution, do not exist. You are chattel. You are a slave. You are property. And it's really, really difficult. It's virtually impossible in courts to win based on law because the law has no effect. And that's what it says in the rules of civil procedure, in the federal rules of civil procedure. The law, not rights, but the law shall have no effect once the rules are established. That's how it's actually worded that way. Rules take precedence over the law, over truth, over rights, because the courts are nothing but corrupt agencies of a de facto government that pretends to be the government. Now, getting back to what my friend Timothy said, we are effing ourselves due to alienation, denial, and disunity. This is what really irritates me. We don't authentically assist one another. We are not there authentically because we are burned out. And that's exactly the game plan. It's to get us to burn ourselves out, spinning our wheels, getting our hopes built up because we find the remedy. We find something in the law that states what we want. We find the remedy, and then we only see it ignored, and our hopes are dashed. And they win by intimidation. They win by threats. They win by violence. It's all coercion. It's not law. It's not a court. They are not judges. It's a scam. It's a sham. It's a facade. It's fraud. And there is no statute of limitations against fraud. The entire judicial system, the entire law enforcement society is a fraud. And all judges, all attorneys, all police people, and law enforcement officers are committing fraud. And people say, when you use the name, you're committing fraud because they own it. Well, they own it unless you use remedy within the law and claim ownership of it yourself, which I have done and many others have done. So it's not, you can't use the name. You can use the name, but you have to establish the claim of right. But even when you establish it, they ignore it because it doesn't fit their game. They make a rule that allows them to sidestep the law, sidestep the truth, sidestep the remedy. They get away with it, they go around it, and mostly just simply by pretending it doesn't even exist. They know better, they're committing crimes. When real courts are established, people will be able to have their remedies honored, but not before. And no court, there are people establishing citizens' grand juries and common law courts in the United States and in other nations. They have no validity whatsoever until they have a means of enforcing the rules and the real indictments. Until they can enforce them. They have found George Bush guilty in absentia of crimes against humanity. I'm sure they've done the same thing with Obama. I'm sure they should have if they didn't do things against some of the bankers like the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds. I know they've done crimes against humanity, but against the popes. At least the current and the previous one. These are pedophiles. Okay? This is the reality of the world we live in. I want you to understand that, and I would hope that some of you will see the importance of why people like me keep saying we need to stick together. We need to become a one voice that cries out for justice. We need to be going to our police departments and telling them, look, your job as a public servant, we are the public. Here's what we want you to do. They did that in a city council. They had the entire city council minus one individual arrested, and the sheriff put the city council in jail. Why? Because they were passing legislation in violation of rights. They were padding their own pockets and using a public office for private gain. You can't do that. That's corruption, and it's rampant throughout our world, and it will remain rampant until enough people step up and say no more, or until the people that actually control the funds, dragon families, say we're not going to fund this criminality anymore. It's over. The Pope issued a decree last year. They're not abiding by that decree. He basically held all the judges accountable for their actions. They could no longer hide behind limited liability. They all stand in full commercial liability for the crimes they're committing. But it's not enforced. Without enforcement, and as long as the current system is allowed to keep being funded, it will keep going on. And in my next video, I probably will address this fear and anger thing that Aristo talked about. Until then, I want to thank you for listening, and I hope I've helped you gain a little bit better understanding of what we're up against. Yes, Timothy, it is a conundrum. Thanks for listening. Namaste.